Rain streaks against the hospital window as the city hums below, indifferent and alive. Evelyn Moretti, 29, steps into the Manhattan Medical Center believing it's just another Tuesday, a quick checkup before another long day of patience and paperwork. The story you're about to hear bears a title that sounds impossible, almost unreal. She went for a routine checkup, but ended up pregnant with the Mafia boss's baby by mistake then. Yet within that title lies a question that will follow us through every moment. How far can fate reach when it wants two worlds to collide? Welcome home, my beloved listeners. Before we begin, breathe for a second. You are valued, you are seen, you are loved. May peace sit softly on your shoulders tonight. May your heart remember its rhythm. Every story I tell is a letter to you, and this one, perhaps more than any, reminds us that love is stronger than fear. Now, hand in hand, let's step into the world of Evelyn Moretti. Her name, her order number, her fate, reduced to a barcode scanned on a plastic wristband. A nurse fumbles. A technician mislabels. Somewhere, a quiet mistake slips through the sterile rhythm of routine, and destiny rearranges itself without sound or warning. If stories like this touch something in you, leave a heart, not because I asked, but because you felt it. Some mistakes heal. Others are born. Evelyn Moretti's mornings began with quiet discipline, the same chipped coffee mug, the same single slice of toast, the same slow exhale before she faced the world outside her Brooklyn window. Her apartment was small, just enough for a life built on order and endurance. She had learned early that routine was safety. The foster homes had taught her that. The hospitals only confirmed it. Every shelf was labeled, every bill stacked neatly on the counter, and her scrubs folded with military precision. She lived like a woman who had long stopped expecting life to surprise her. Yet, there was something fragile beneath that calm surface, a quiet longing, a question she never said aloud. What if life could be more than survival? She hid that question the way she hid old photographs from her childhood, tucked away behind medical textbooks she read at night. At work, she was composed, capable, almost mechanical in her precision. But beneath the white coat was a woman exhausted by her own competence, someone who carried the invisible weight of always being the one who holds everything together. Across the river, Dante Valieri's world woke differently. Power hummed through marble hallways and security radios, the distant echo of men who spoke softly but carried consequences. His morning began not with coffee, but with silence. In his penthouse above Fifth Avenue, he stood by the window, watching the city breathe like a god surveying creation. No one knew that silence was the only thing that ever comforted him. He wore it like armor. The men around him saw a strategist, a man with no hesitation, no weakness. But behind that calm gaze lay a mind haunted by a single memory, his younger brother Marco's body lying in a warehouse years ago, blood pooling under the fluorescent light while Dante's hands trembled for the first time in his life. The guilt had never left him. It lived beneath his suits, between his breaths, and in the space where his heart should have been. He learned to turn grief into precision, love into strategy. He ran his empire with surgical coldness because emotion, he believed, kills faster than bullets. Evelyn's days stretched in predictable loops, hospital corridors, patient charts, the soft hum of machines that kept people alive. Yet even there, she was an outsider. Colleagues saw her professionalism, but rarely her loneliness. After long shifts, she would stop at a corner deli, order the same soup, and eat by the window while the city moved on without noticing her. Sometimes, she watched couples pass by, hands intertwined, laughter spilling into the night, and wondered if there was something defective in her wiring, something that made connection feel foreign. Her friends often told her she needed to put herself out there, but she had tried. It never worked. The world wanted noise. She offered stillness. The irony was that she spent her days saving lives while slowly losing the meaning of her own. Dante, on the other hand, lived in noise disguised as order. Meetings in dim rooms. Deals whispered over fine wine. Loyalty measured not by truth, but by fear. He had built a kingdom where no one dared look him in the eye for too long. Every favor came at a cost. Every smile hid a calculation. Yet, beneath the surface, he longed for something simple, a voice that didn't tremble around him, a hand that didn't flinch. He would never admit it aloud, but the empire he ruled felt like a gilded cage. Even the walls seemed to echo his father's words. A Valieri protects his blood above all else. But what if the blood itself was poisoned by legacy? What if power was the very thing that kept him from being human? In her small apartment, Evelyn often fell asleep at her kitchen table, medical files open beside a half-empty cup of tea. She had learned to ignore the dull ache in her chest that came from silence. When people asked about her personal life, she smiled politely, deflecting with humor. "My patients keep me busy," she'd say, knowing that the truth, that she didn't know how to let anyone in, was too complicated. The scars of her childhood foster placements lingered. Each move taught her not to get attached, not to expect permanence. Love was something she studied in others, but never trusted for herself. Yet, beneath all that logic, she still wrote her mother's name in an old notebook once a year on her birthday, even though she had never met her. It was her quiet rebellion against forgetting. Meanwhile, Dante's reputation was a myth carved by fear. They called him the Ghost of Manhattan because no one ever heard him coming, and no one ever saw him bleed. But those closest to him knew the truth. He wasn't a ghost. He was a man buried alive under expectation. His father's shadow still stretched across his empire like a scar, a constant reminder that mercy had no place in their world. Dante had tried to run once, years ago. He fell in love with a woman who didn't belong to his circles, a violinist named Lena. When his enemies found out, they used her to send a message. The memories still haunted him, her voice silenced because he dared to feel. Since then, he replaced vulnerability with command, affection with control. He didn't believe in accidents, only betrayals waiting to happen. Evelyn's quiet life, though ordinary, was a fragile masterpiece of control. She kept her schedule tight, her boundaries tighter. But lately, there had been small cracks, forgetting her lunch, missing a bus, misplacing her keys. She brushed it off as fatigue, unaware that these small lapses mirrored something shifting inside her, the slow unwinding of a life too tightly wound. She had just finished her certification renewal exam and allowed herself a small victory smile. For the first time in months, she felt proud of herself. She didn't know that the very next morning, her name would appear on a chart it was never meant to touch. In the heart of Dante's world, a different kind of mistake was taking shape. His lawyer, Antonio Rizzi, sat across from him in the private study, his voice hesitant. "The hospital board wants your signature for the renewal of the foundation's medical program," he said carefully. Dante's family had funded a private fertility clinic as a means of laundering clean money through research grants, a harmless front, or so it seemed. Dante barely looked up from his drink. "Sign it," he muttered. But Antonio hesitated. "They're requesting genetic material updates for insurance verification. Standard procedure." Dante gave him a cold glance. "Handle it." What he didn't know was that somewhere in that same facility, a file labeled under his donor code would soon be tagged with the name Evelyn Moretti. Two lives, separated by wealth and circumstance, moved in parallel rhythms without knowing how close their worlds were about to collide. Evelyn's night ended with rain against her window, the same sound that began Dante's mornings. They both looked out over the same city, unaware they were staring at each other's horizon. One prayed for peace, the other for forgiveness. Both had no idea that fate was already writing their names into the same story. In moments like these, life doesn't shout, it whispers. A technician hums absent-mindedly as she swaps two labeled samples. A nurse double-checks paperwork, but misses the switch. A computer logs the change automatically, indifferent to the consequence. And somewhere in a penthouse above the skyline, Dante Valieri raises a glass to a night he thinks he controls. In a Brooklyn apartment, Evelyn sets an alarm for another early shift, unaware that her life has already been rewritten. Fate, in its quietest form, had just taken its first breath. And in that breath lay the seed of everything to come, the mistake that would tie a doctor who believed in science to a man who only trusted silence. Two lives destined to intersect not by love at first sight, but by error at first record. And when morning came, neither would know that their ordinary worlds were already gone, replaced by something waiting just beyond comprehension. The rain continued to fall over New York that night, washing the streets clean of footprints, yet marking forever the paths of two people who had never met. For now, they existed in separate realities, unaware that the clock had already started ticking toward the day when one knock on her door would end the life she thought she knew. It began with a sound so ordinary that Evelyn almost ignored it. A knock at her apartment door, just as she was finishing a late dinner of pasta and cold tea. She had spent the day at the clinic, reviewing patient files long after her shift ended, hoping exhaustion would distract her from the growing unease in her chest. The knock came again, firm this time, echoing through the narrow hallway. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward the door, expecting a delivery or a neighbor's mistake. But when she opened it, two men in tailored suits stood in the doorway, rain dripping from their coats, their expressions unreadable. "Dr. Moretti?" One of them asked, his voice smooth but heavy. She nodded cautiously. "We're from the Manhattan Medical Board," the taller man continued, holding up a badge that gleamed briefly under the dim hallway light. "We need to discuss an irregularity in one of your recent tests." Evelyn's stomach tightened. "Irregularity? I don't understand," she said, stepping back slightly. The shorter man offered a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll explain everything inside." They entered without waiting for full permission, their movements coordinated like men who'd done this before. Evelyn tried to steady her voice. "If this is about billing, I've already cleared." "It's not about billing," the taller one interrupted. "It's about confidentiality. A serious breach." The air shifted. She crossed her arms, forcing composure. "Then call me from the office tomorrow." "This isn't appropriate." The men exchanged glances. "We'd prefer to handle this quietly," the shorter one said. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Something in their tone felt wrong. Too rehearsed, too precise. "Show me your ID again," she said. The taller man obliged, flipping his badge open longer this time. The seal looked legitimate, but her instinct screamed otherwise. "You'll be hearing from my attorney," she said, trying to end the conversation. But the man's reply was soft and unsettling. "That won't be necessary. Mr. Valieri will take it from here." Before she could respond, the apartment door opened wider from behind them, revealing a figure she didn't recognize but would never forget. Dante Valieri stepped inside like someone accustomed to rooms bending around his presence. His charcoal suit looked untouched by rain, his movements deliberate, measured, quiet. For a second, Evelyn couldn't speak. There was something about his stillness. It wasn't arrogance, it was control. He studied her the way a surgeon studies anatomy, assessing what could break. "Dr. Moretti," he said finally, his voice calm, too calm. "I believe we have a problem." She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the counter behind her. "Who are you?" Dante gave a faint smile that wasn't quite polite. "Someone whose name found its way into your medical records." His words landed like a blow she couldn't see coming. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, the tremor in her voice betraying her. "Then allow me to explain," he replied, stepping closer. "A fertility clinic under your hospital's care somehow filed a report linking my genetic signature to your name. My attorney believes it's an error. I don't believe in errors." The words hung heavy in the room. Evelyn felt her breath shorten. "That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "I didn't authorize anything like that." Dante tilted his head slightly, watching her closely. "I'd like to believe you. Truly. But my world doesn't reward trust." His men stood silently near the door, their posture firm, their hands loosely clasped in front of them like guards outside a confessional. "Look," Evelyn began, trying to regain control. "Whatever mix-up happened, I'll speak to the board. We'll get this fixed. But you can't just show up here. This is harassment." Dante's voice remained calm, even kind on the surface. "If I wanted to harass you, doctor, you'd know. I came to give you a chance to explain before others decide you don't deserve one." That quiet threat settled into her spine like cold metal. "Others?" she asked. "Who else knows about this?" Enough, Dante said simply. Enough to make you a problem. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain outside pressed softly against the windows, a sound that should have been peaceful, but now felt like a warning. Evelyn straightened, her voice trembling between fear and defiance. You need to leave. Dante's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. If I thought walking away would solve this, I would. But your name and mine are now attached in a way that attracts attention neither of us can afford. She exhaled sharply, frustration boiling over. So, what do you expect me to do? Apologize for something I didn't do. Dante's expression barely changed. I expect you to listen. Someone wanted this to happen. You're not the target, doctor. You're the weapon. The words cut through her confusion. What are you saying? She asked. That someone used me? Used both of us, he said, his tone quiet, but heavy with something like regret. And before you start asking who, trust me, you don't want to know yet. Her rational mind searched for logic, but logic felt small in the presence of a man like him. This sounds insane, she said softly. I work 12-hour shifts, I pay my rent late, and I don't even have a car that starts half the time. I'm not part of anyone's scheme. Dante's gaze didn't waver. That's exactly why you were chosen, he said. You have nothing to hide. People like that make perfect shields. Evelyn laughed nervously, disbelief breaking through panic. This is ridiculous. Dante's jaw tightened. Ridiculous would be thinking this ends at your apartment door. My enemies are patient. They use precision where others use force. If they wanted chaos, they wouldn't have touched a doctor. They'd have touched me. This. He pointed subtly between them. This is strategy. She shook her head again, unable to process. So what now? You're here to threaten me into silence. No, he said. I'm here to keep you alive. Something in his tone, flat yet sincere, startled her more than his presence. Keep me alive, she echoed. You're making it sound like someone's after me. Dante's eyes met hers, steel meeting glass. They're not after you. They're after what's inside you. The implication sank slowly, chillingly. Evelyn's breath caught. You think I'm pregnant, she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer until they were just a few feet apart. I think someone wants me to believe you are, he said. And that alone is enough to put you in danger. She could barely breathe. This is insane, she murmured. You can't just... I can and I will, he interrupted gently. You'll have security outside your building by morning. 2 cars, no questions asked. Don't argue. Evelyn tried to protest. You can't control my life. But Dante's reply was simple, final. I already do, doctor. You just don't know it yet. The air between them felt charged, not romantic, not hostile, something in between. She wanted to hate him, yet some part of her believed him. His calmness wasn't arrogance. It was the calm of someone used to violence and consequence. Why should I trust you? She asked finally. Dante's answer came, without hesitation. Because if you don't, you won't live long enough to decide whether you should. The bluntness of it made her flinch. You sound like a threat, she said. No, he replied. I sound like a fact. He turned toward the door, signaling his men. We'll be in touch. Wait, she said suddenly. Why me? Out of every person in that hospital, why me? He paused at the doorway, not turning around. Because you are the only name clean enough to make the story believable. Then, before she could respond, he was gone, leaving the faint scent of rain and cologne behind him. The apartment felt smaller after he left, as if his presence had rearranged the air. Evelyn locked the door, her hands trembling. She leaned against it for a long moment, trying to calm the panic rising in her chest. What just happened? Was she really in danger, or had she just been intimidated by a powerful man spinning paranoia into authority? Her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe there had been a hospital error, maybe this was a scam, maybe none of it was real. But then she noticed the card he had left on her table, a single piece of black matte paper with a number embossed in silver and a name beneath it. D. Valieri. She turned it over, expecting something more, but the back was blank. That night, she barely slept. Every sound outside her window felt amplified, the hum of passing cars, footsteps on the pavement, a distant siren. When her phone buzzed near midnight, she jumped. The message read, "Don't open your door for anyone tonight." No sender ID, no name, just those 8 words. Her pulse pounded as she stared at the screen. She typed back, "Who is this?" But the message failed to deliver. Fear wrapped around her chest, but beneath it, a strange calm took hold. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was in danger, and she didn't even know why. Across the city, Dante sat in the back of his car, watching the rain streak across the tinted glass. His driver asked quietly, "You think she's telling the truth?" Dante didn't look up. "She doesn't know enough to lie." "And if she's part of it?" the driver pressed. Dante's eyes hardened. "Then she'll regret it before they do." He glanced down at the phone in his hand, the one he'd used to send her the message. His thumb hovered over her name longer than it should have. He told himself it was precaution, nothing more. But even he didn't fully believe that. By morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of a car engine idling outside her building. When she looked through the curtain, a black SUV sat parked across the street. 2 men inside, both watching the entrance. Her heart pounded. "Oh my God," she whispered. She grabbed her phone, typing a message to the hospital administrator. "We need to talk about an incident involving my records."
Urgent.
No reply came. She tried calling, but the line disconnected after 1 ring. Panic tightened her throat. She sat on the edge of her bed, running a shaking hand through her hair, whispering to herself, "What did I get caught in?" Hours later, while she sat in her kitchen staring at the untouched cup of coffee, her phone buzzed again. This time with a call. Unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello." Dante's voice came through the line, calm and familiar now. "You're safe for the moment," he said. "My men are outside." She exhaled sharply. "You're having me followed?" "Protected," he corrected. "You need to understand something, Evelyn. Someone went through a lot of trouble to make our lives intersect. That means this isn't over." She closed her eyes, exhausted. "You keep saying someone who? Who would even want to do this?" "Someone who thinks they can use innocence as leverage," Dante said quietly. "Someone who knows I'd notice." "Notice what?" she asked. "You," he replied. The single word left her breathless. "I don't even know you," she said. "You will," he answered, and the line went dead. That was the moment Evelyn realized her life was no longer her own. Everything she had built on structure and logic had shifted beneath her feet. She didn't know whether Dante Valieri was her captor or her protector, whether his world was chaos or control, but one thing was certain. Whatever had started in that hospital lab had now crossed into something she could no longer reason her way out of. And as the night deepened, the rain returned, echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, a man watched the same rain fall, and for the first time in years, felt something he couldn't name, something that sounded like fate calling his name. He whispered to himself as the city lights flickered across his face, "You're under my protection now," and though Evelyn couldn't hear him, the promise already carried through the storm. The following morning sunlight crept through thin curtains, painting Evelyn's apartment in pale gold that should have felt safe, but instead pressed against her nerves like a weight. She woke to the sound of the same car engine outside, steady and patient, idling where the curb met the street. The clock read 6:43 a.m. She sat up slowly, heartbeat quickening as realization hit. He wasn't bluffing. The man from last night, Dante Valieri, had said there would be cars watching. Now there they were. Her fingers trembled as she pulled back the curtain just enough to see. The same black SUV she'd noticed before sat across the road, windows tinted, motionless except for a faint plume of exhaust rising in the cold air. A man in the driver's seat lifted a paper cup to his lips, but didn't look up. She whispered under her breath, "This can't be real." Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. The text came from an unknown number again. "Stay calm. There for your safety. Don't talk to anyone from the hospital until I say." She exhaled shakily. "I don't even know you," she murmured, tossing the phone onto the couch. But even as she said it, She felt the smallest flicker of something between fear and relief. Someone was watching, but for once, maybe not to hurt her. She got ready mechanically, as if muscle memory could protect her from confusion. In the mirror, her reflection looked like someone else. Eyes tired, shoulders tense, every motion careful. When she finally opened the door to leave for work, a man standing near the elevator straightened from the wall. "Morning, doctor," he said politely, his tone professional but firm. She froze halfway into the hall. "Do I know you?" she asked. "You don't need to," he replied. "Mr. Valieri asked me to make sure you get to the hospital safely." She blinked, disbelief twisting into frustration. "I didn't ask for a bodyguard." He nodded once. "I know." But he did. His gaze didn't waver. It wasn't intimidation, it was duty. Evelyn felt anger rising. "Tell him to stop this. I'm not part of his world, and I don't want to be." The man didn't move. "I'll pass the message," he said quietly, stepping aside to let her through. She stormed past him, muttering under her breath, "This is insane." But when she stepped into the morning chill, she realized she wasn't alone. The same black SUV rolled forward slowly behind her as she walked toward the subway, its presence steady, constant, impossible to ignore. At the hospital, whispers followed her. The front desk clerk looked nervous when she walked in, offering a smile that didn't last. "Morning, Dr. Moretti," he said quickly, eyes darting toward a man in a gray suit seated by the entrance. She hesitated. "Who's that?" The clerk shrugged, said he was waiting for someone. Evelyn turned, recognizing one of the men from the previous night. He nodded slightly, the gesture so subtle it could have been coincidence. She walked straight past him into the elevator, her pulse thudding in her ears. On the third floor, she found her friend and coworker, Lisa, stacking patient files. "You look like you saw a ghost," Lisa joked, then frowned at her expression. "Ev, what's wrong?" Evelyn hesitated, then whispered, "Something's happening, and I can't explain it. Some men came to my apartment last night. One of them said he was connected to the hospital board. Now, there's someone following me." Lisa's face paled. "That's crazy. Did you call the police?" "No," Evelyn said softly, "because the man behind it isn't someone the police can protect me from." Later that afternoon, while reviewing charts, Evelyn noticed her patient data file missing from the system. She frowned, typing her credentials again. Access denied. She tried another terminal. Same result. Her hands began to shake. "No, no, no," she muttered. She walked to the records office, but the clerk there avoided her gaze. "Dr. Moretti, your profile's been restricted for review," he said awkwardly. "Restricted by who?" she demanded. "Board directive," he replied. Her stomach dropped. "Which member?" He lowered his voice. "Valieri Foundation Liaison. They fund part of the fertility department." The sound of that name made her freeze. She turned away without another word, walking quickly down the hall as her mind spun. He had said she was under protection, not under control. Yet somehow, his reach had found its way into her workplace, erasing her autonomy one careful move at a time. By evening, she couldn't stand the tension. She texted the unknown number. "We need to talk. Now." No response. She tried again. "Stop sending people to my building. I'm not your property." Moments later, her phone rang. The same voice from last night filled her ear, calm and low. "You're safe, aren't you?" Dante Valieri asked. "Safe?" she repeated bitterly. "There's a man outside my apartment, another one at the hospital, and apparently you've locked me out of my own records." There was a pause. "That was to protect you," he said. "From what?" she demanded. "From being found," he answered quietly. She pressed her palm against the wall, trying to steady herself. "You can't control my life like this." "I'm not controlling it," he said evenly. "I'm preventing it from ending." His tone was infuriatingly composed, and she hated that part of her believed him. "You're unbelievable," she said. "You show up in my home, you decide who watches me, and you call it protection?" He sighed softly. "You think I enjoy this? You think I want another life tied to mine? This isn't choice, Evelyn. It's damage control." Her voice softened, almost breaking. You don't even know me. Dante's reply came quietly. Then let me fix that. Before she could respond, he added, Dinner. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. My driver will wait outside. You'll come because you want answers. She shook her head, though he couldn't see it. I'm not coming, she said firmly. You will, he replied, and the line went dead. She stared at the phone, torn between fury and fear. That night, she barely slept, pacing the apartment, arguing with herself in whispers. I should call the police, she muttered, then countered. And tell them what? That a man I can't prove exists has me under surveillance. The helplessness settled over her like fog. She finally collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion pressing down heavier than fear. Outside, the SUV never moved. When morning came again, she tried to resume her old routine. Coffee, keys, coat, but the normalcy felt forced. As she reached the lobby, the driver was already waiting, leaning casually against the car. Good morning, doctor, he said, opening the back door. She hesitated, clutching her purse. I told him I wasn't coming. The driver smiled faintly. He said you'd say that. He also said you'd change your mind. She stood still, indecision tightening her chest. Something in her gut whispered that if she got in that car, her life would never be the same. But another part, the one exhausted by fear and questions, wanted the truth more than safety. She took a slow breath and stepped inside. The car smelled faintly of leather and rain. No words were exchanged during the drive. When the vehicle finally stopped, they were outside an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. She was escorted to a private dining room where Dante sat already waiting, his jacket draped neatly over the chair beside him. You came, he said simply. I didn't have much of a choice, she replied. There's always a choice, he countered. She folded her arms. Then why do you make it feel like I don't? He regarded her quietly. Because if I let you think you do, you'd walk straight into danger. She exhaled through her nose. You keep saying that like it's supposed to make me grateful. No, he said. Just alive. For the first time, she saw something different in him. Not arrogance, but weariness. I didn't send those men because I enjoy control, he said. I sent them because someone out there wants to use you to reach me. Evelyn's voice softened slightly. Then tell me who. He shook his head. You wouldn't sleep again if I did. Dinner unfolded like a tense negotiation disguised as civility. He asked questions about her work, her family, her life, his tone measured, almost curious. You grew up in foster care, he said at one point. That must have taught you to survive. She met his gaze. It taught me to keep people out. A faint smile touched his lips. That's what we have in common. The honesty between them startled her. For a moment, the distance that defined them seemed to waver. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Whatever this is, you can just stop. Dante leaned forward slightly. If I could stop, I would have done it years ago. Silence hung between them until he added, almost to himself, You remind me of someone I lost. Her heart tightened, but she didn't ask who. As the night ended, he stood, adjusting his cufflinks. You'll continue your normal routine, he instructed. My men will stay nearby. She frowned. So, I'm back to being followed. Protected, he corrected again, meeting her eyes. There's a difference. She stepped closer, defiance flickering in her voice. Maybe to you. But where I come from, protection without consent is just another form of control. He paused, studying her face with quiet respect. You're stronger than you think, he said finally. That's why they picked you. Who are they? She asked sharply. The ones who think every life can be bought. His gaze darkened. And they're wrong. When he walked her to the car, the air between them was charged with something she couldn't name. Fear, curiosity, maybe something far more dangerous. As she stepped inside, he rested a hand on the door. You'll get a call tomorrow from someone claiming to be from the hospital, he said. Don't answer. She nodded uncertainly. And if I do? His voice lowered. Then I can't protect you. The car door closed, sealing his warning in her mind. Back home, She sat in silence, the city's noise muffled by her own thoughts. For the first time since this began, she didn't feel entirely angry, just tired, confused, and oddly aware of the man who had somehow entered her life like a storm she couldn't avoid. She whispered to herself, "What are you, Dante Valieri?" The question lingered unanswered as her phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail from an unknown number. She pressed play, her pulse racing. A woman's voice, calm and unfamiliar, said, "Dr. Moretti, this is about your recent medical procedure. We need you to come in tomorrow alone." The message ended abruptly. She stared at the phone, realizing the choice was no longer hers. Outside, the black SUV pulled away for the first time in days, disappearing into the rain, and Evelyn understood that whatever waited for her tomorrow would decide whether this was still her life or his. Evelyn arrived at the clinic just after sunrise, her hands buried deep in her coat pockets, the cold Manhattan air biting against her skin, as if reminding her she could still feel something real. The street was quieter than usual, almost unnaturally so. The hospital wing she knew so well, normally alive with early patients and delivery trucks, stood still, as if holding its breath. She clutched the voicemail replaying in her mind, the calm voice that had said, "Come in tomorrow alone." A nurse she didn't recognize opened the door, her eyes flicking nervously over Evelyn's shoulder before forcing a professional smile. "Dr. Moretti, right this way." Her tone sounded rehearsed, too even. Evelyn nodded slowly, stepping inside. The fluorescent lights above flickered once before steadying. Her heels echoed down the polished corridor, and with every step, unease crept higher up her spine. "You said someone from the board needed to see me?" she asked. The nurse didn't look back. "Yes, ma'am. Just down the hall." Evelyn noticed her badge was turned backward, the laminated side blank. "You new here?" she pressed. The nurse hesitated a beat too long before replying. "Something like that." Evelyn stopped walking. "Something like that?" The nurse's silence answered everything. The realization hit too late. A sharp metallic noise echoed from the other end of the corridor, something between a door slam and a muffled crash. The nurse stiffened, then whispered, "You need to go." Evelyn frowned.
"What?"
The woman's hand trembled as she pointed toward a side exit.
"Now. Run."
Before Evelyn could react, the sound of rapid footsteps filled the hallway, then shouts. Low, masculine, commanding. The nurse turned and sprinted down another corridor, disappearing behind a row of curtains. Evelyn's instinct as a medical professional clashed with the primal terror clawing through her chest. She backed up slowly toward the exit, but before she reached it, a man staggered around the corner clutching his abdomen. Blood seeped through his shirt, dark and fast. "Help me," he groaned, collapsing to his knees. Evelyn's body moved before her mind could argue. "Oh my God, sit down," she said, catching his shoulders. Her hands pressed against the wound automatically, the way she had done hundreds of times before, but when the man looked up, his voice cracked through her focus. "Tell Dante," he coughed, choking on blood. "Tell him it's done." Her breath caught. "Dante Valieri?" she asked. His eyes widened in confusion and recognition all at once. "You're her," he rasped. "The doctor." The gunfire started before she could ask another question. A deafening series of cracks filled the hallway, shattering glass and silence alike. She dropped beside the wounded man as bullets tore through the air, her heart hammering so loud she could hear nothing else. Somewhere beyond the chaos, voices shouted orders, cold, professional, coordinated. She crawled toward the emergency supply cabinet, yanking it open and pulling a white cloth to press against the man's wound. "Stay with me," she yelled over the noise. His grip tightened on her wrist, leaving a streak of blood against her skin. "Get out," he hissed. "They're not here for me." "Then who?" she began, but the sound of approaching boots cut her off. The man's eyes closed. "You." Evelyn froze as his hand slipped from hers. In that instant, something in her world shifted. Every lie, every unanswered question crashing together into one truth she wasn't ready to face.
She ran.
Her shoes slipped on blood, and broken glass, her breath ragged, lungs burning. She burst through a side door into the back parking lot, where the sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. Behind her, someone shouted, "There! By the exit!" She spun, blinded by adrenaline. Two men in dark suits emerged from the doorway, one raising a gun. "Stop!" he barked. She raised her hands instinctively, but before he could move closer, a black sedan screeched around the corner, tires slicing through puddles. The back door flung open, and Dante Valieri stepped out with terrifying composure, his eyes scanning the chaos like a man used to walking through storms. "Evelyn!" he shouted. The sound of her name from his lips froze her in place. The gunman turned toward him, hesitating just long enough for Dante's bodyguard to strike. Shots rang out again, this time controlled, deliberate. Evelyn ducked, covering her head. When the noise stopped, Dante was standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, voice low but sharp. "You told me to trust you," she snapped back. "And look where that's gotten me." He didn't flinch. "I told you not to come alone." Dante guided her into the car, his hand firm on her back. "Get in," he ordered. She resisted. "I just watched someone die in front of me because of you," she said, her voice trembling between rage and disbelief. "You owe me the truth." His jaw clenched, but there was no anger in his eyes, only exhaustion. "The truth," he said quietly, "is that the man you tried to save worked for me. And the people who shot him worked for someone who wants you dead." She stared at him, stunned. "Why would anyone want to kill me?" "You're not just anything," he interrupted. "You're connected to me now, and that makes you leverage." She shook her head, trying to process. Leverage for what? He turned to face her fully, his expression tightening. "To make me bleed where they can't touch me. To use innocence as a weapon." She swallowed hard, her mind spinning. "And what about the hospital? The records, the pregnancy tests, was that even real?" He hesitated, his silence answering for him. "Tell me, Dante," she pressed, her voice breaking. "Was it real?" His answer came like a confession.
"No."
"It was engineered." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Engineered," she repeated, almost laughing through disbelief. "You mean someone planted your DNA in my file?"
"Why?"
"To scare you." He looked away briefly, then back at her. "To control me." She could feel anger building in her chest, rising faster than fear now. "So my life was collateral? Some kind of message?" "A trap," he said simply. "They wanted me to find you."
"To care."
"Because when I care, I make mistakes." She stared at him, heart pounding. "So I was bait," she said softly. "That's what you're telling me." "You were never supposed to be hurt," he said, his tone low, almost pleading. They didn't account for how far it would go. Neither did I. She laughed bitterly, tears threatening to spill. "You think that makes it better?" He didn't answer. For the first time since meeting him, she saw guilt flicker across his face. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, human, heavy. The car sped through the city as she sat in silence, arms wrapped around herself, mind replaying every interaction they'd had, every warning, every half-truth. "So what now?" she asked finally. "Do I just disappear? Start over? Pretend none of this happened?" Dante turned to her, voice softer now. "You don't get to disappear. You get to survive." "That's not survival," she said. "That's captivity with nicer walls." He leaned closer, his tone steady. "You're angry, and you should be. But until I find out who paid for that lab to mix our names, you stay alive because I say so." "You're unbelievable," she said again, the phrase almost a whisper. He exhaled slowly. "You'll understand soon enough." His phone buzzed. He answered with a clipped tone. "Talk." After a pause, his expression darkened. "Find the woman who made the call," he said into the receiver. "She knows too much." He hung up, his voice dropping. "Someone at the clinic gave you that message. They knew exactly when you'd show up." The next hours blurred into a haze of flashing lights and sirens as the car pulled into one of his properties, a quiet townhouse in an upper Manhattan street that looked disarmingly normal. Inside, the space was minimalist but cold, filled with muted colors and quiet tension. Evelyn sat on the couch, shaking, while Dante poured 2 glasses of water. "You need to rest," he said. "I need the truth," she replied. He handed her the glass. "Ask." She met his gaze. "You said the man I saved worked for you. What was his name?" "Paolo," he answered without hesitation. "He was my brother's friend. He stayed close after Marco died." The mention of his brother softened something in his voice she hadn't heard before. "You said someone betrayed you back then," she recalled quietly. "Was it the same people?" He stared into the distance.
"Some of them."
"Some knew. Betrayal is an inheritance in my world." Evelyn hesitated before asking, "And your brother? What happened to him?" Dante's eyes flickered, the mask of composure breaking for a fraction of a second. "He trusted the wrong person, just like you did." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them carried too many truths, too much weight. When she finally whispered, "I never wanted to be part of this," his answer was low, almost tender. "Neither did I." It wasn't an excuse, it was an acknowledgement, 2 people trapped in the same mistake from different angles. He stood then, walking toward the window. "Someone inside that clinic sold your name," he said. "They were paid to connect it to my file, then send you that message. They wanted chaos, and they got it." She frowned, confusion clouding her voice. "But why use me?" "There had to be easier targets." He turned back to her. "Because you're credible."
"Clean."
"No criminal record, no scandal, no reason anyone would question your story. If they wanted to paint me as careless, as someone losing control, attaching my name to yours was the perfect move." She whispered, "They used me to hurt your reputation. And your life to test my restraint," he added. "They thought I'd erase you. Instead, I'm protecting you." The irony twisted between them like wire, protection that looked like confinement, care that felt like punishment. Evelyn rubbed her temples, exhaustion pulling at her. "So what happens to me now?" she asked. Dante's gaze held hers steadily. "You stay where I can see you. Until this ends. And if I say no," she challenged. "Then you die," he said simply. There was no threat in his voice, just certainty. "You're unbelievable," she whispered again, this time more to herself than him. "You keep saving me from dangers you create." He didn't respond, just looked away, his reflection fractured in the glass. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft and rhythmic against the windows. She set the glass down carefully, her voice barely audible. "You can't keep me caged forever." "I don't intend to," he said. "Only long enough to make sure you live." Night settled around them, heavy and slow. She watched him from across the room, his composure, the quiet rage beneath it, the exhaustion of a man fighting enemies she couldn't name. "You're angry," he said after a while. "I'm terrified," she corrected. He nodded once. "That's good. Fear keeps you sharp." "Fear kills people," she countered. "So does trust," he replied. Their eyes met, the air thick with tension neither of them could define. She wanted to hate him, to scream, to demand her life back, but all she could do was whisper, "Why me?" He looked at her, eyes shadowed. "Because someone knew I'd protect you." The words lingered in the air, more intimate than anything they'd shared before. She turned away, heart pounding, realizing that the danger wasn't just outside anymore. It was standing across the room, wearing a face she was beginning to understand too well. In the quiet that followed, her phone buzzed once on the table. Dante reached for it first, his expression hardening as he read the message aloud. "We know whose child you carry." Evelyn's breath caught, her world tilting again. Dante's gaze met hers, the cold edge of realization cutting through his voice. They just declared war. That night the world seemed to tilt around them. The message still glowed on Evelyn's phone when Dante grabbed his coat and said in a tone that left no room for argument, "We're leaving."
"Now."
She hesitated, staring at the words again. "We know whose child you carry." "What does that even mean?" she asked. Dante didn't answer. He was already calling someone, his voice clipped, cold, controlled. Lock everything down. Burn the addresses, move the cars. Evelyn stood motionless as he took her arm, not roughly, but firmly enough that she understood this wasn't a request. Dante, I can't just disappear. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. You already have. You just haven't accepted it yet. Outside, rain slicked the street in silver as black cars appeared like ghosts from the dark. She climbed into one, heart pounding, watching the city she knew fade behind tinted glass. Every streetlight reflected back a different version of her face. Doctor, witness, target. She whispered, "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere no one can find you," he said. "That's what scares me," she murmured, and he didn't deny it. They reached the penthouse close to midnight. It sat high above the skyline, the kind of place that made silence sound expensive. The elevator opened directly into an open floor plan of glass and steel. Dante keyed in a code, locking the world out with a soft electronic hum. Evelyn took in the space. Minimalist, almost sterile, no photos, no personal touch, just a life built for secrecy. "So this is where you hide," she said. "Where I survive," he corrected. She turned toward the window, arms crossed. "I didn't ask for protection." He poured 2 glasses of water, his movements precise. "You didn't have to. Someone decided you were leverage, and leverage needs to stay breathing." She studied him, the exhaustion behind his posture, the faint tremor in his hand that he tried to mask. "You look tired," she said quietly. He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't sleep much." "Because of me?" "Because of everything that touches me," he replied. She looked down. "Then I guess I'm contaminated now." "No," he said softly. "You're the first clean thing I've seen in years." For a long while neither spoke. The city's hum filled the silence, a low reminder that life continued below, indifferent to their crisis. Evelyn finally broke the quiet. "You really think they'll stop?" He leaned against the counter.
No.
"They'll regroup. And when they do, we'll be gone again before they blink." She exhaled, frustration bleeding into fear. "You make it sound like running is normal. In my world, it is." She turned toward him sharply. "And what about my world? I had patience, a life, a reputation. All of that's gone now because of you." He met her anger without flinching. "Because of them," he corrected. "I'm the reason you're still breathing." Her voice cracked. "And the reason I can't stop looking over my shoulder." Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I can't change what's happened, Evelyn. All I can do is make sure you live long enough to hate me for it." She stared at him, tears stinging but refusing to fall. "That's not comfort. It's honesty," he said. Later, while he made calls from another room, she wandered through the penthouse trying to understand the man behind its emptiness. Everything was too neat, too quiet. The books on the shelf were arranged by height, not subject. The bed, untouched, perfectly made. A single photograph sat face down on the nightstand. She turned it over, a younger Dante with another man who looked like him, both laughing, their arms slung over each other's shoulders. The inscription on the back read, "Marco, before everything changed." She replaced it gently, her chest tightening. When Dante returned, she didn't mention what she'd seen. "Who was he?" she asked instead. His pause lasted long enough for her to regret the question. "My brother," he said finally. "He died because I believed someone I shouldn't have." She watched him, voice softer now. "And you never forgave yourself." He didn't answer directly. "Forgiveness doesn't bring people back," he said. She nodded. "But it keeps the living from turning to stone." He looked at her for a long time, as though hearing something he hadn't expected to. "You really believe that?" "I have to," she whispered. "Otherwise, what's the point of saving anyone?" Hours slipped by. They sat opposite each other in the dim light, exhaustion blending with the strange calm that follows survival. Dante's phone vibrated again. He silenced it. "You should get some rest," he said. "You're shaking." "I'm angry," she corrected. That's the same thing tonight. She gave a faint, humorless laugh. You don't even realize how you talk like you own people. I own problems, he said. People just come with them. That's a terrible philosophy. It's kept me alive. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a thread of understanding that felt too fragile to touch. She looked away first. Do you ever miss it? Being ordinary. He thought for a moment. I wouldn't know what that feels like. Maybe that's why you can't stop saving broken things, she said quietly. His lips curved faintly. Maybe that's why you let me. Her heart lurched at the truth buried inside his words. She whispered, I didn't let you. You forced your way in. Maybe, he said, but you didn't push me out. As night deepened, rain softened to mist outside. Dante poured another drink, this time offering it without a word. She took it, their fingers brushing for a moment that lingered longer than reason allowed. The air between them shifted, still tense, but edged with something human. She studied him closely, the faint scar near his jawline, the weariness in his eyes that no amount of power could hide. What happens if they find us? She asked. They won't, he replied. You sound sure. I don't make promises I can't keep. She hesitated, then asked, and if they find out I'm really pregnant? He stopped mid-sip, lowering the glass slowly. Are you? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. But if I am, what then? His expression softened just slightly. Then everything changes. She laughed bitterly. That's all you ever say. Everything changes, nothing explains. Because explanations get people killed, he said. And hope keeps them alive. She stared at him, wondering if he actually believed that, or if it was the only lie he still told himself. Sometime near dawn, she dozed off on the couch. When she woke, a blanket covered her shoulders, and Dante sat nearby reading a file. Couldn't sleep? She asked groggily. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Sleep's a luxury. I don't have. What are you reading? Names, he said. People who made choices they shouldn't have. You mean people who hurt you? No, he said quietly. People who hurt you. The realization struck her. He was investigating the clinic, chasing whoever had engineered the mix-up. You don't have to do this alone, she said. I've been alone longer than you think. That's not what I asked. He closed the file slowly. If I involve you, they'll use you again. And if you don't, they already are, she replied. The room went quiet. Finally, he said, You have a strange way of making me listen. Maybe you're just not used to someone talking back. No, he said, almost smiling. I'm not used to someone being right. Days passed in a rhythm that felt borrowed from another life. They stayed inside, curtains drawn, phones off, existing in a bubble where danger felt distant but never gone. Sometimes she caught him watching her as she read on the couch or scribbled notes in her journal. You ever stop working? He asked once. You ever stop guarding? She shot back. He smirked slightly. Fair. Despite herself, she began to see the man behind the legend, the quiet decency beneath the danger, the subtle gestures of care, the way he always made sure her tea was still warm, how he never locked her door though he could have. And she, despite everything, began to soften. One evening, when thunder rolled over the skyline, she whispered, You scare me, Dante. He looked up from his chair. Because of what I've done? Because of how I feel around you. He said nothing, but his hand tightened slightly around the glass he held. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged, alive, waiting. That night became the first moment they stopped pretending the line between fear and desire still existed. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't gentle. It was human, raw, born out of exhaustion and truth. They kissed like two people who had been holding their breath for too long. There was no music, no candlelight, just the sound of rain against glass and the quiet desperation of two lives colliding. Afterward, neither spoke for a while. She traced the scar on his shoulder and whispered, What now? He replied, Now we survive. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She looked at him, realizing that beneath the armor, He was every bit as lost as she was. "You think love can exist in your world?" she asked softly. He met her gaze. "I think it's the only thing that ever made mine worth anything." For the first time, she believed him. Morning came pale and quiet. Evelyn stood by the window watching fog roll over the river while Dante made coffee. For a fleeting second, it almost felt normal, until his phone vibrated across the counter. He glanced at it, and his entire expression changed. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Don't lie to me." He looked at her, jaw tightening. "One of my men hasn't checked in. That means either he's dead or he's talking." "Talking about what?" "About you," he said flatly. She stepped closer. "So, what happens if he tells them where we are?" "Then this place won't be safe anymore." "Then where do we go?" "Nowhere yet," he said. "I'll handle it." She caught his arm. "You're not leaving me here alone." He shook his head. "You think I'd ever leave you unguarded? Someone's already watching the building." Her voice trembled. "Yours or theirs?" He didn't answer. That silence said everything. The hours stretched tight with waiting. Every sound, the elevator hum, a car door outside, the creak of the wind, felt amplified. Evelyn paced while Dante stared out the window, phone in hand, waiting for the call that would decide their next move. When it came, his reaction was immediate. "Say that again," he said into the phone, his tone darkening. After a moment, he hung up, turning toward her. "One of my own gave them our location." Her heart stopped. "So they're coming?" "They already know where we are," he said. "We have to leave, now." She grabbed her coat, panic rising. "How much time?" "Minutes." He pressed a gun into his holster, checking the chamber. She stared at it, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't belong in this world." "Neither do I," he said. "But we're in it together now." They reached the elevator, the air thick with urgency. As the door slid shut, an explosion echoed somewhere below, the building trembling from the shock. Dante pulled her close as alarms blared through the penthouse, whispering, "They've found us." Evelyn looked up at him, eyes wide with terror, and he said the words that would carry them into the next act. "Whatever happens next, don't let go." The elevator lights flickered, the city roaring below, and the story hung in the breath between love and war. The elevator shook violently, metal screaming as concrete dust filled the air. Evelyn clutched Dante's arm, the emergency light flickering between red and shadow. "Don't let go," he said again, his voice steady even as the ground shifted beneath them. The explosion above was close, too close. The power cut for a heartbeat, plunging them into darkness, and then the emergency brake slammed, jarring them both against the wall. She gasped, feeling her knees buckle, but his hand stayed firm at her waist. "You're okay," he said, his breath ragged. "You're okay." She could barely hear him over the echoing rumble, the groan of cables straining. "What just happened?" she whispered. "They found us," he replied. His tone was flat, resigned, the sound of a man who had predicted this moment every day of his life. The elevator rocked again, and she reached for his chest, gripping his jacket for balance. "We have to get out," she said. "Not yet," he warned. "The shaft's unstable." "Then what?" she demanded. "We wait. We survive," he said simply. Above them, another explosion shook the walls, and then came the sharp hiss of fire suppressants spraying into the building. "They're coming," Dante muttered, pulling her close. "Through the service levels. Stay behind me." "And if we don't make it?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Then I'll make sure you do," he said quietly. When the doors finally jerked open halfway, the corridor outside was half collapsed, smoke curling through broken vents. Dante shoved them wider with his shoulder, wincing as metal scraped skin. Evelyn crawled through first, coughing, her eyes watering. "This way," he said, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the stairwell. They descended fast, boots echoing, hearts pounding. The entire building trembled with distant gunfire. "Who are they?" she shouted over the noise. "My own," he answered bitterly. "Someone sold us out." "Why?" "Because loyalty costs more than fear." On the second floor, a figure appeared through the smoke, a tall man in black, gun raised. Dante, the man called. They have orders. Dante's return shot echoed before the sentence finished. The man dropped instantly. Evelyn flinched, covering her mouth. You didn't even ask, Dante said. If he was loyal, he'd have lowered the gun. His cold efficiency terrified her more than the violence. You can't know that, she whispered. In my world, hesitation kills, he said, grabbing a keycard off the fallen man's belt. They reached the lobby, now a maze of debris and alarms. Evelyn stopped when she saw the body of one of the guards she had once seen escorting her from the car. You knew them, she said softly. Dante didn't look back. Not well enough. Outside, the night burned with chaos. Cars were ablaze, men shouting into radios, bullets cracking across the street. Dante pulled her toward a narrow alley. Move, he barked. She stumbled after him, adrenaline fighting panic. Dante, this is madness. Welcome to my reality. They cut through the alley and into the loading dock behind a deli, where a black SUV waited idling. Get in, he ordered. No, she snapped. Not until you tell me who's doing this. He turned on her, face hard. Evelyn, you don't have time for an explanation. I deserve one, she shouted, voice trembling. For a moment, something in him cracked. His tone softened. It's Franco, he admitted. One of mine. He thinks if he takes you, he can bargain his way into the seat I sit in. So, you're fighting your own? They stopped being mine the minute they pointed their guns at you. Before she could respond, headlights flared at the alley's mouth. Too late, he said, pushing her into the SUV. Tires squealed as they sped off, bullets pinging against the metal. Evelyn curled against the seat, covering her ears. This never ends, does it? She whispered. No, Dante said. But it changes you. They drove for miles through the outer boroughs until the city lights thinned and the roads quieted. Evelyn stared out the window, her reflection fractured in the glass. Where are we going now? She asked. To fix what broke. How do you fix betrayal? She said softly. You remove it. By killing him, she said. He glanced at her. By confronting him. Killing's the easy part. She turned away. You don't have to sound so proud. I'm not proud, he replied. I'm exhausted. They stopped at an abandoned warehouse near the docks, one of his older hideouts. Dante parked, cutting the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. Stay here, he said, stepping out. No, she replied firmly. You're not walking into that alone. He looked at her like he wanted to argue, then sighed.
Fine.
But if things go wrong, you run. I'm not leaving you again, she said. He smiled faintly. You keep saying that like you have a choice. Inside, the air reeked of oil and seawater. Shadows moved between steel beams. He's here, Dante murmured. How do you know? Because betrayal has a smell, he said. It's always too quiet before it speaks. They rounded a corner, and Franco stepped out, unarmed but smirking. Dante, he said smoothly. You brought her. Evelyn froze. You set this up, she whispered. You used me. Used is such a harsh word, Franco said. You were a necessity. Dante's voice was low, dangerous. You sold me out. You sold yourself the moment you got attached, Franco shot back. You made her your weakness. Evelyn's chest tightened at the words. Is that true? She asked Dante. He didn't look at her. Get behind me. Answer me, she demanded. He's trying to make you doubt me, Dante said. That doesn't mean he's wrong, she whispered. Franco laughed.
See?
Even she knows love's just another word for exposure. Say one more word, Dante warned.
What?
That you ruined her life because you couldn't stand being alone. Dante's gun fired before the last syllable left Franco's mouth. The echo lingered longer than the man's heartbeat. Evelyn's scream broke through the ringing in her ears. You didn't have to do that, she shouted. Yes, I did, Dante said, lowering the gun. You could have walked away. You could have. And leave him alive to come after you again? His voice cracked, raw. You don't understand what people like him do. She stepped back, shaking. I understand that every time you protect me, someone dies. His jaw tightened, his chest rising with every shallow breath. You think I want this? He said. You think I enjoy it? I don't know what you feel, she said, tears finally falling. Because everything you touch turns to chaos. He looked at her, something breaking quietly behind his eyes. You think I don't see that? He said, softer now. You think I don't know that I ruin everything I care about? She turned away. Then stop. He laughed bitterly. I can't. This is who I am. Then maybe I don't want to be part of who you are, she said, voice trembling. The silence after those words was louder than the gunshot that had ended Franco. They left the warehouse at dawn, both changed. Dante drove without speaking, his hands tight on the wheel. Evelyn stared ahead, her thoughts an unending reel of grief and anger. Finally, she said, You think saving me makes up for what you've done? He didn't answer. You can't keep fixing things by destroying people. I fix what I can reach, he said quietly. Then maybe you should stop reaching. He looked at her briefly, pain flickering in his expression. If I hadn't reached for you, you'd be dead. And maybe that would have been simpler, she said. His knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. Don't say that.
Why?
It's true. No, it's not. You don't get to decide what's true for me, she yelled. The car screeched as he braked suddenly, turning toward her. I've lost everyone I've ever loved, Evelyn. Don't make yourself next. The confession hung heavy in the air. Neither spoke again for the rest of the drive. Hours later, back at another safe house, smaller, darker, more isolated, Evelyn packed her bag while Dante watched from the doorway. You're leaving, he said flatly. I have to. Where will you go? Anywhere you're not. You won't make it a day. Then at least it'll be my choice, she said, zipping her bag. Don't do this. You can't protect me forever, Dante. I can try. That's what scares me, she whispered. He stepped closer. You'll regret walking away. She looked up at him, eyes tired but resolute. Maybe. But at least I'll know what freedom feels like. He reached out as if to touch her, then stopped himself. You think freedom's peace, he said quietly. It's just loneliness with better lighting. Maybe, she said. But it's mine. She brushed past him, her hand grazing his arm one last time before she left. That night, Dante sat alone in the same chair where she had once fallen asleep. Her tea mug still sat on the table, cold, untouched. He poured a drink, staring at the amber liquid that caught the faint city glow. His phone buzzed, a text from one of his men. She's safe.
For now.
He typed a single reply. Keep it that way. For the first time in years, his empire felt hollow. The men who had feared him now doubted him. The woman he had protected now hated him. And for once, he couldn't blame anyone but himself. He whispered into the empty room, I should have let her run the first day I met her. His reflection in the glass stared back, hard eyes, tired soul. He lifted his glass in a quiet mock toast. To the things we can't protect without breaking them. Outside the window, headlights flashed once, then disappeared down the street. Dante frowned. Moments later, his phone buzzed again, this time a message with no sender name. You can't keep her safe anymore. We have her. His drink fell from his hand, glass shattering against the floor as he whispered, Evelyn. The city woke under a bruised sky, the kind that looked heavy with regret. Morning sirens stitched through Manhattan's silence, and somewhere in the east, Dante Valieri watched smoke curl from a building that had once been his. The streets whispered that his empire was collapsing. But he didn't care about territory, money, or reputation anymore. Only one name kept his pulse steady. Evelyn. He hadn't slept. The night had stretched into a blur of phone calls, broken trust, and gunpowder air. Every lead he chased ended in ashes. His men were split, half defected, half dead, and the few left looked at him not as a leader, but as a curse. He poured coffee into a paper cup with shaking hands and stared at the map spread across the table. She's alive, he said to no one in particular. Luca, the last man he trusted, stood near the window. We're trying, boss. But they're everywhere. The Rossis hit 2 of our routes last night. They're closing in. Dante's voice was low, raw. Then we close faster. He circled the harbor district in red marker. That's where they'll move her. Franco's dead, but his brother will want revenge. He'll trade her to the feds or use her to smoke me out.
Luca hesitated.
You can't take the docks alone. I don't need an army, Dante replied. I need a reason. He looked up, eyes hollow but blazing. And she's that reason. Across the river, Evelyn's morning came without sunlight. The room was concrete, a single bulb overhead, chains not on her wrists, but on the fear inside her mind. She could still smell the faint trace of antiseptic on her clothes, a reminder of what she used to be, a healer, not a hostage. Her pulse matched the distant hum of engines outside. A guard brought in a plate of cold toast and a glass of water. Eat, he muttered, setting it down. She stared at him. Where am I? Safe enough, he said without meeting her eyes. For now. Does Dante know I'm here? She asked. He exhaled, annoyed. You should worry about yourself, lady. That man brings death wherever he goes. Then you've never really met him, she said quietly. When he left, she pressed her hands together, whispering to herself, You're not alone. He's coming. The words felt fragile, but they steadied her. She remembered the way Dante's hand had trembled the night he said, Don't let go. That tremor had been fear, not for himself, but for her. She clung to that truth like oxygen. Back at the warehouse, Dante loaded his weapon, the smell of metal and oil filling the air. Boss, you can't go in blind, Lucas said again. Blind men see clearer when they've got nothing left to lose. Dante holstered the gun. They think she's my weakness. They're wrong. She's my compass. Lucas swallowed hard. And what if she's already? Dante's glare stopped him. Don't finish that sentence. The older man sighed.
All right.
Then, what's the plan? Dante looked toward the window where sunlight broke through smoke. You take the north pier. I'll come from the south. We cut the power at 9 sharp. And if the cops show? They won't. I made sure of it.
How?
I bought their silence the way I always do with blood. Lucas stared at him. You're burning your last bridges, Dante. They were already ashes, he said, walking out. Meanwhile, Evelyn studied the pattern of footsteps outside her door. 2 guards, one heavier, one nervous. Every hour, the younger one paused near the frame, his keys rattling softly. She waited for that rhythm, memorizing it, breathing with it. When he lingered longer than usual, she called out softly, What time is it? He hesitated. 10. Morning. Yeah. What day? Friday. She smiled faintly. Thanks. Why do you care? Because Friday's the day I get rescued, she said. He laughed uneasily. You think that guy's coming for you? You're dreaming. Maybe, she said, but even dreams have roots in truth. Something about her calm unnerved him. He walked off faster than before. Evelyn leaned her head against the wall. If you can hear me, Dante, she whispered, I still believe you'll find me. The docks came alive before noon. Trucks lined the lot, cranes groaning as containers shifted overhead. To anyone passing by, it looked like business as usual. But under the surface, an ambush waited, men hidden behind crates, rifles glinting in shadow. Dante parked 2 blocks away, heart pounding steady and controlled. The ocean smelled of salt and gasoline. He walked with purpose, coat collar high, hands empty, eyes sharp. Every step carried the weight of years spent building a world that was now turning against him. You always knew it'd end like this, he muttered. Not with cops or courts, but with choice. He reached the fence and cut through it with quiet precision. The guard inside barely saw the shadow before the silencer whispered twice. Dante caught the body before it fell, dragging it out of view. For Evelyn, he said under his breath. At that same hour, Evelyn's cell door clinked open. Franco's brother, Matteo, stepped inside. His smile was thin, deliberate. You don't look scared, he said. Should I be? She asked.
Depends.
Your boyfriend has a habit of making widows. She met his gaze steadily. You mean he made one out of your mother too? His face hardened instantly. Careful, he warned. That mouth won't save you. No, she said, but it reminds you I'm not weak. You're nothing but leverage, he said coldly. And when I'm done, he'll crawl here himself. You're underestimating the wrong person, she replied. He won't crawl. You think he'll fight for you?
He already is.
Matteo chuckled. Then he's walking into hell. He's lived there longer than you've been alive. The slap came fast, but Evelyn didn't flinch. Blood filled her mouth, metallic and warm. You think pain scares me? She whispered. Try loneliness. Outside, the wind picked up as Dante reached the south dock. His phone buzzed once. Luca's coded signal. North side clear. He crouched behind a stack of cargo, listening. Voices carried across the water, men barking orders. He spotted Matteo's SUV near the loading bay. He knew this terrain. He had built half of it under his father's rule. Every bolt and shadow felt like a memory. He moved quickly, silently, until he reached the stairwell leading up to the office level. That's when he heard it, a faint sound, a voice muffled but distinct. Evelyn's. Dante. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to ignite every cell in his body. He pressed the comm in his ear. Luca, she's here. Then we move, Luca replied. Wait for my mark. No, Dante said, standing. The mark is now. He kicked the door open and stepped into the storm. Bullets shattered glass instantly. Dante fired back, every shot deliberate. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, smoke thickening. He advanced through the corridor, one enemy after another falling in his path. She's here. Matteo shouted. Kill him. Dante's voice cut through the chaos. You touch her, you die. Evelyn heard it through the walls, the sound of him, a promise more than a threat. Her heart surged with something stronger than fear. She grabbed the chair in her room and smashed it against the door, forcing the lock loose. As the last bolt gave way, she slipped into the hall, ducking behind crates. She could see flashes of muzzle fire ahead, Dante's silhouette moving like vengeance given form. Dante, she shouted once. He turned sharply, spotting her through the smoke. Evelyn, get down, he yelled. A bullet whizzed past her ear. She dropped just as he fired over her shoulder, the assailant collapsing behind her. She stared up at him, blood on his face, fury in his eyes, love in both. You came, she whispered. Always, he said. He reached her in 3 long strides, his hands trembling as they met her shoulders, checking for wounds. You hurt, he asked, voice rough. She shook her head, catching her breath. Only my patience. His lips almost curved, but another burst of gunfire cut the air. Stay behind me, he ordered. I didn't come this far to hide, she said, grabbing a fallen pistol. Evelyn, I'm not asking permission. Their eyes locked for one beat too long. Then they moved together, back to back, through the smoke-choked hall. Each sound, each heartbeat, felt stretched and electric. When they cleared the stairwell, Luca appeared from the other side, blood on his sleeve. 2 trucks incoming from the West Pier, he shouted. Dante looked to Evelyn. We end this now. Then end it, she replied, gripping the gun tighter. They pushed into the open bay. Sunlight cut through drifting ash. The roar of engines built as Matteo's men advanced. Dante crouched beside a crate, reloading. You always did like making grand exits, Luca muttered. I like finishing what others start. Dante rose, firing at the nearest truck. Tires burst, metal shrieked. Evelyn ducked behind a forklift, returning fire at the men spilling from the second vehicle. One fell, another scrambled for cover. She was shaking, not from fear but from the realization of what she'd become, no longer the woman waiting to be saved. Dante, she called, tossing him a spare clip. You throw better than half my men, he said, catching it midair. Maybe because I'm fighting for something real, she replied. His eyes softened for a fraction of a second before another blast rocked the ground. Matteo's voice echoed from the catwalk above. You think this ends with bullets, Valieri? You'll never outrun the blood you built your throne on. Dante stepped into view, gun steady. "You're right," he said. "I'm not running." He fired once, the bullet grazing Mateo's shoulder. The younger man ducked, cursing. "You can't kill what's already multiplying," Mateo spat. "Your world's dying, and she'll die with it." Dante's calm was frightening. "Then I'll burn what's left to keep her warm." Evelyn stared at him, at the man who could terrify and comfort in the same breath. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't let him drag you into what you're trying to leave." Dante looked at her, torn between rage and reason. "He took you. He made you a target. And you make yourself one every day," she said. "If you want to save me, save yourself first." For a moment, everything slowed. The gulls above, the smoke twisting around sunlight, the silence before violence. Then Mateo stepped forward again, raising his weapon toward Evelyn. "If I can't break you," he said, "I'll break him." The shot rang out, but not from Mateo's gun. Dante's bullet struck first, driving him backward into the rail. Mateo's own weapon discharged wild, shattering a window. He toppled over the edge, disappearing into the dark water below. The echo faded, replaced by the hiss of fire and the heavy rhythm of waves. Dante stood motionless, the gun lowering slowly. Evelyn exhaled a shuddering breath. "It's over," she whispered. "No," Dante said. "Now it begins." Sirens wailed in the distance. Real ones this time, not the imagined threats of paranoia. "We need to go," Luca said. "Cops are coming." "Let them," Dante answered. "We've got nothing to hide." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "You've got everything to hide," she said urgently. "They'll put you away for this." "Maybe that's what should happen." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You don't get to trade your life for mine again." He looked at her, truly looked, as if memorizing her face. "Then what do I do?" "You live," she said simply. "You help me end what started all this." She pulled out the flash drive she'd stolen from Mateo's desk during the chaos, a file marked clinic records.
"Proof," she said.
"Names, payments, everything they did." Dante's eyes widened slightly. "You had this the whole time? I figured one of us should think ahead." "You never stop surprising me." "Good," she said. "Keep it that way." They escaped through a side door, slipping into the maze of shipping containers as the first police cars arrived. The wind off the river was cold, laced with salt and fuel. Dante's steps slowed as they reached the edge of the pier. "This place took everything from me," he said. "And still you came back," Evelyn replied. "Because you were here." He turned to her. "You could have walked away 100 times. So could you," she said. But we both kept walking toward each other. For the first time, he smiled, not the mask he gave the world, but something quiet, human. "You make damnation feel like redemption." She touched his cheek, her hand trembling. "Then maybe it's neither. Maybe it's just love." They reached an old ambulance Dante had arranged as backup. Luca climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine. "Where to?" he asked. Evelyn looked out toward the skyline. "The city still needs to know the truth," she said. "The clinic, the corruption, all of it." Dante hesitated. "If you release that, you'll put a target on your back again." "Then they'll have to aim through both of us," she said. He chuckled softly. "You're reckless." "You're contagious," she replied. The vehicle pulled away, weaving through the docks toward the main road. Behind them, the harbor burned, flames reflecting in the water like fragments of a shattered crown. Hours later, they hid in an old motel on the outskirts, its neon sign half dead. Evelyn sat on the bed with her laptop, uploading the clinic files to a journalist she trusted. Dante watched from the corner, bandaging his arm. "You trust this reporter?" he asked. "Enough to risk everything." "You're learning my bad habits," he said. "No," she replied, eyes still on the screen. "I'm learning courage." The upload bar crept toward completion. "Once this goes live," she said, "the families won't have the leverage anymore. The cops, the hospitals, they'll have to face it." "And you?" he asked. "I'll face myself." She looked up at him. "Will you?" He didn't answer, just stared out the window at the highway lights. When the story broke an hour later, phones buzzed across the city. The fertility clinic scandal hit national news, exposing the network that had manipulated patients and laundered money through hospital wings. The Valieri name appeared, but not as villain. "You're free," Evelyn whispered. "Free's a dangerous word," Dante said. "So is love," she answered. He walked over, sitting beside her. "What happens now?" "Now we rest," she said. "Tomorrow, we decide who we want to be." He leaned his head against hers. "You still think there's a tomorrow for people like us?" "There has to be," she said softly. "Otherwise, all this was for nothing." The room fell quiet except for the hum of traffic. Outside, dawn painted the sky pale gold. Dante closed his eyes, the weight of years settling on him. "You changed me," he murmured. "I just reminded you you're human," she replied. He smiled faintly. "That's the cruelest mercy." "No," she said. "It's the beginning." The light touched her face, turning her tears to silver. "We'll leave tonight," he said. "Disappear before they decide to come for us again." "Where?" "Somewhere no one knows my name. And if they find us, then I'll fight again. But this time for the right reason." "Which is?" she asked. He looked at her, the answer already written in his eyes. "You." They held each other as the first sunlight spilled through the curtains. For the first time, neither of them reached for a weapon. Evelyn rested her hand over his heartbeat and whispered, "It's still there." "For now," he said. "That's enough." The sound of approaching sirens faintly returned in the distance, but neither moved. The war outside might not be done, but the one within them had found its ceasefire. A faint thud outside their door, soft, deliberate. Dante's eyes opened. He mouthed one word, "Run." The screen fades to black as the doorknob turns, leaving only the echo of Evelyn's whisper. "Don't you dare leave me now." The morning light came filtered through linen curtains, thin as memory. The ocean was calm, the kind of calm that feels earned after a storm that almost took everything. Dante Valieri woke to the scent of salt and the soft rhythm of waves brushing the coast. His body still ached from the bullet wound, stitched by Evelyn's steady hands weeks earlier, but the ache no longer frightened him. It reminded him he was still alive. He turned his head and saw her sitting by the window, wearing one of his shirts, the sleeves rolled above her wrists. She was reading a letter from the hospital board, another apology framed as procedure, another attempt to erase guilt with paper. "You should rest," he said quietly. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes calm but far away. "I've been resting for weeks, Dante. I need to start living again." He watched her silhouette against the light and whispered, "You're the only thing that makes this life feel real." Evelyn folded the letter and set it aside. "The investigation's finished," she said. "They've shut down the fertility wing. Everyone involved is either in custody or hiding." Dante nodded slowly, the faintest shadow crossing his expression. "And me?" he asked. "Where do I fit into their neat little conclusion?" She met his gaze. "They think you disappeared." He gave a half smile. "Maybe I did." He stood, walking carefully toward her, every movement deliberate. "You saved my life, Evelyn. You could have left me to die and told the world I was another casualty of my own choices." She rose to face him, voice steady. "You think saving you was mercy? It was responsibility. You stepped in front of that bullet because you wanted to end something. I pulled you back because I wasn't ready for endings." He looked down, ashamed yet touched. "I don't deserve the chance you gave me." "No one does," she said softly. "That's what makes it grace." Outside, gulls screamed over the water. Dante leaned on the window frame beside her. "When I was a kid, my father told me power's the only language the world respects. He said love makes you weak." He paused, studying the horizon. For the first time, I think he was wrong. Evelyn crossed her arms, the wind catching her hair. "Love doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest. And honesty costs." He looked at her. "What's it cost you?" "Every illusion of control I ever had," she answered. "But that's the thing about control. It's just fear dressed up as discipline." Dante smiled faintly. "You always did see through the armor." She turned, walking toward the kitchen. "Armor's heavy. Maybe it's time you tried walking without it. And what if I can't? He asked. She filled 2 mugs with coffee, placed one in his hands, and said, "Then you start with one honest morning." They sat across from each other at the small table overlooking the ocean, the silence between them deep but gentle. "So," Evelyn began, tracing the rim of her cup, "what now?" Dante exhaled. "I have enough cash hidden to vanish for good. No one would find me. Not the FBI, not the old families." She studied him quietly. "And you think disappearing will save you?" He shrugged. "It'll save you." "That's not the same," she replied. "You can't protect me by erasing yourself. I've protected you every way I know how." "Exactly," she said. "That's the problem." Her tone softened. "You keep fighting ghosts, Dante. Maybe it's time you stop being a soldier." He leaned back, eyes weary. "I don't know who I am without a war to fight." "Then maybe that's who you're supposed to become," she whispered. "A man who doesn't need one." A breeze pushed through the open door, fluttering papers on the counter. One of them, a crumpled note, fell near Dante's hand. It was from Luca, written before he disappeared after the last battle. "The city needs new blood, not more violence." Dante stared at the words, then at Evelyn. "He was right," he said. "Everything I built turned to ashes because I couldn't imagine peace." Evelyn reached for his hand. "You don't have to imagine it anymore. You just have to live it." "With you?" he asked, voice low. She hesitated. "That depends on what you mean by living." "I mean staying, building something clean, away from everything I ruined." She looked down. "You say that like I haven't already built a life before you came." He flinched. "I didn't mean I know," she interrupted softly. "But we can't build a future on debt, even emotional ones." He stood, pacing slowly toward the doorway that opened to the balcony. "You're saying goodbye." She followed him, her expression tender but resolved. "I'm saying the truth out loud before we both pretend again. What happened between us, it changed me, but it can't define me." "So this is it?" he asked. "After everything?" "After everything," she confirmed. "You taught me strength I didn't know I had. But that strength also tells me when to walk away." Dante gripped the railing, knuckles white. "You make it sound easy." "It's the hardest thing I've ever done," she said. "But love that survives fear should never live in it." He turned toward her, eyes glistening. "You think you can just forget me?" She smiled sadly. "Forgetting you isn't the goal, Dante. Living beyond you is." Minutes passed like hours. The tide crept closer to the rocks below. Evelyn placed her hand over her stomach. "He'll know who you are," she said. "Even if you're not here. I'll make sure of that." Dante swallowed hard. "You're keeping him?" "Of course," she said, almost smiling. "He's half of you, half of me. Maybe he'll be the best parts of both." He nodded slowly, voice barely a whisper. "I'd like to believe that." "Then believe it," she said. "Because belief is the first step toward peace." He stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch her cheek, then stopped. "If I stay, I put you at risk. If you go, you break us both," she replied. "So pick your poison." "Love or power," he murmured. "It was always going to come down to that." She met his eyes. "Then finally choose love and see where it leads." The sound of waves filled the silence that followed. Dante's jaw tightened. "You deserve more than a ghost watching from the shadows." "Then don't be one," she said simply. "Be a father, a man, a survivor. Whatever you choose, choose it fully." He exhaled through a quiet laugh that sounded almost like surrender. "You talk like you've got it all figured out." "No," she said, brushing a tear away. "I just stopped pretending I can fix everything. Maybe you should, too." He looked at her, really looked, the way a man looks at something he knows he can't keep but will never forget. "If I walk out that door, I want you to know one thing," he said. "I will never stop protecting you, even if it means you never see me again." She whispered, "You already have." They moved closer, the distance between them collapsing until their foreheads met. The moment stretched, quiet and full. Dante whispered, "You changed my life." "No," she replied. "You changed it yourself." I just held up the mirror. He smiled faintly, then kissed her, soft, deliberate, final. When he pulled back, the world seemed to hold its breath. Take care of him, he said, glancing at her belly. He'll need you more than he'll ever need my name. He'll need both, she whispered. A mother who forgave and a father who learned how. He nodded once, stepped back, and picked up the small duffel from beside the door. She didn't stop him. Some loves are sacred because they end at the right time. He walked outside, the sun spilling gold across the sand. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching him grow smaller against the horizon. He turned once, lifting a hand in farewell, then continued down the beach until the wind erased his tracks. She pressed a palm to her chest and whispered, "Be free, Dante." The ocean answered with a crash that sounded like applause. She closed the door and leaned against it, breathing through the ache in her throat. For the first time, she didn't feel fear or longing, just quiet acceptance. She looked at the half-empty coffee cups, the open window, the light filling the room, and said softly, "It's enough." That night, Evelyn sat alone at the same table, writing in a worn leather journal. Her words were steady, her heart open. Love doesn't fix what's broken. It teaches you to live with the cracks. He was never my mistake. He was my reminder that even in the darkest places, you can still find grace. She closed the journal and whispered to the silence, "Thank you." Outside, the moon rose over the water, calm and eternal. She walked to the window, resting her hands on the frame, her reflection merging with the night. The waves shimmered like memory, carrying away everything that once chained her to pain. Tomorrow would bring new choices. Tonight was enough. As she turns off the lamp, a car's headlights sweep briefly across the window, too deliberate to be random. She pauses, her breath catching, a faint smile curving her lips. "Still watching," she murmurs. "Still keeping your promise." The sound of the sea swells, merging with the slow piano theme as the screen fades to black, leaving the audience suspended between farewell and hope. The year had passed like a quiet wave, pulling everything it once touched back into stillness, and sometimes, when Evelyn closed her eyes, she could still hear the city she left behind, the hum of Manhattan streets, the echo of sirens that once shaped her nights. Now, her mornings began with the sound of wind slipping through wooden shutters and the rhythm of the sea brushing against the rocks below her small cottage. She'd chosen the coast for a reason. Here, the world felt wider, and time moved like forgiveness, slow, patient, unwilling to be rushed. "I used to think peace was a place," she whispered one morning, as sunlight stretched across the kitchen table, glinting against her wedding band she no longer wore. "But peace is just the absence of fear." Her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from the memory of how long it took to learn that truth. Each breath, each sunrise, reminded her she'd survived more than she ever expected to, and yet somehow, the silence of safety sometimes hurt more than the chaos she left behind. When her son stirred in the next room, a faint cry soft against the sound of the sea, Evelyn smiled. She moved to cradle him before he could wake fully, his tiny fingers curling instinctively around hers. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured, pressing her cheek to his forehead. "You have your father's hands." They were small now, but the shape was unmistakable, the same slender strength, the same stillness that Dante carried in his every gesture. The thought was both comfort and ache. Every time she looked at her child, she saw pieces of a man the world had forced her to lose and yet refused to let her forget. "You'll never know the things he did to keep us alive," she whispered, rocking slowly in the quiet. "And maybe that's how it should be." The boy blinked up at her, blue-gray eyes open, steady, curious. He didn't know that love, once born in danger, had rewritten everything about who she was. He didn't know that the man whose blood he carried had taught her that strength sometimes meant surrender. Days blended into one another. She worked in a small clinic run out of a converted church, tending to fishermen, farmers, and the occasional traveler who wandered in needing care. There were no bodyguards now, no black cars, no late-night calls from unknown numbers. The world she once knew existed only in newspaper clippings and old memories tucked deep enough that no one could find them. Still, every so often, she felt a familiar presence, an energy she couldn't name. The hum of an engine idling a little too long near her street, the flicker of a silhouette at the corner of her vision, the echo of footsteps fading just as she turned. It never frightened her. Instead, it settled in her like reassurance, as if the universe itself refused to let her stand alone. One evening, as she closed the clinic, her assistant laughed lightly. "Dr. Moretti, I think someone's watching over you." Evelyn had smiled faintly and said only, "I know." Because she did. She felt him, not as ghost or memory, but as the quiet promise of protection that never asked to be acknowledged. At night, after her son fell asleep, she would sit at her desk beneath the open window and write. It started as a way to breathe through what words couldn't hold. Letters she never sent. One for every chapter of the life she'd lived beside Dante. Some angry, some forgiving, some full of questions she no longer needed answered. "I went for a checkup that day," one began, the ink slightly smudged from her tears, "and ended up meeting the man who destroyed everything I knew, so I could finally start living." She paused after writing that line, realizing how impossible it was to separate destruction from creation, loss from love. Every heartbreak had built her into someone new. Every wound carried the shape of the man who once held her hand through chaos. In another letter, she wrote, "You would have been a terrible husband, but an unforgettable man." It made her laugh softly through the ache, because it was true. Dante never belonged to stillness. He was born of motion, of risk, of consequence, of unspoken loyalty. He could protect, he could love, but he could never stay. And somehow, she'd stopped needing him to. One late afternoon, as the sky dimmed into coral haze, Evelyn walked the beach barefoot, her son bundled against her chest. The air smelled of salt and distance. She thought about how Dante had once told her that the ocean terrified him. Too unpredictable, he'd said, and she teased him for sounding like a man who needed the world to obey. But now, standing at the edge of that endless horizon, she understood him differently. The ocean was everything he was, a vast, powerful, unknowable force that could destroy or deliver salvation in the same breath. "You'd hate this quiet," she whispered, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "But maybe you'd love seeing him." Her son stirred slightly, tiny hand pressing against her collarbone. "Your father once said the most dangerous thing a man can do is care too much," she told him softly. "He learned that too late. And I learned that sometimes caring is what saves us." The waves rolled in, touching her toes, and she felt her heart settle into something like peace. Weeks turned into months, and Evelyn began to see traces of her old self returning, the woman who once believed in order, in science, in cause and effect. But she was different now. The logic she used to hide behind had been softened by emotion, and the woman who once needed control now understood the beauty in uncertainty. One afternoon, while treating an elderly patient with shaking hands, she realized something profound. She'd spent years saving people's bodies, but never their hearts, including her own. "You're doing God's work here," the woman told her, voice thin but warm. Evelyn smiled, replying, "Maybe we're just saving each other." That night, she wrote another letter to Dante. "You were chaos, and I was reason. But maybe reason needed chaos to finally feel alive." She folded it neatly and placed it in the box with the others, tied together with a red ribbon, the color he always wore when he wanted luck. It wasn't closure. It was gratitude. Sometimes, in dreams, she saw him. Not as the man he became, but as the boy he must have been before the world hardened him. Barefoot, laughing unguarded. The kind of laughter she only heard once in real life, that night on the penthouse balcony when the city lights flickered like stars trying to compete with the truth between them. She would wake up with tears on her pillow, whispering, "I still miss you." And in those quiet hours, she imagined he could hear her. Maybe somewhere, in another city, another life, Dante Valieri was standing by a window, cigarette between his fingers, listening to the same ocean wind and whispering her name back into it. She'd never know for sure. But some loves didn't need confirmation. They simply existed, like gravity, felt even when unseen. One night, during a storm, the power went out. Evelyn lit candles around the house, the shadows stretching across the walls like memories. Her son stirred restlessly in his crib, so she carried him to the window and hummed softly, an old Italian lullaby Dante once hummed without realizing she was listening. Thunder rolled in the distance, rain streaking the glass, and in that flickering light, she saw a black car parked just beyond the bend of the road. It wasn't unusual in this quiet town. Travelers often passed through, but something in her chest tightened. She stood there for a moment, rocking her son gently, whispering, "It's okay." The headlights blinked once, as if in silent acknowledgement. Then the car pulled away into the rain. She exhaled, her heart trembling between ache and relief. "Good night, Dante," she said softly, as if speaking to the air. The storm outside raged, but inside, peace held its ground. As months turned into seasons, Evelyn's world became gentler. Her clinic expanded, her patients multiplied, and her laughter returned slowly, like sunlight after long winter. Her son learned to walk, then talk, and the first word he said was "Mama." The second was light. She never taught him that word. It came naturally, as if he carried it from somewhere she couldn't reach. "You'll be as light," she whispered one night, holding him close, just like he tried to be mine. She didn't realize tears had slipped down her cheeks until her boy wiped one with his tiny thumb and said, "No cry." She smiled through it.
No, baby. No cry.
Because she wasn't sad anymore. She was full of life, of memory, of quiet love that no distance or death could steal. A year to the day since it all began, Evelyn walked to the post office with a small package in her hand. Inside were the letters she'd written to Dante, sealed with wax but addressed to nowhere. The clerk asked gently, "No return address?" Evelyn smiled. "They're not meant to come back." She left the package in the outgoing bin, stepped into the crisp air, and tilted her head toward the sun. The weight she carried for so long finally lifted. She wasn't sure if Dante was alive, or watching, or gone entirely. What she knew was that love had changed her, reshaped her into someone capable of choosing peace even after war. And that was enough. She walked home lighter than she'd ever felt, her son's laughter echoing behind her like the sound of new beginnings. That night, as the world outside settled into quiet, Evelyn wrote one last note, not to Dante, but to whoever would listen beyond the walls of time. Her voice gentle, almost a whisper, she said, "Wherever you are tonight, may peace visit your home. May love find you in the quiet hours. And may your heart rest easy, knowing that even in the darkest places, love remembers its way home." She placed the note on her windowsill, where the moonlight could reach it, and lay beside her son as the waves whispered their endless rhythm. Somewhere in the distance, faint and familiar, a car engine hummed once before fading into the night. "Before you go," she would say to those who listened to her story through the screen, "take this with you. If this story touched something in you, leave a light in the comments, not because I asked, but because you felt it. Tell me you're still here, so I know our hearts met tonight. And if you ever find yourself between love and fear, choose love. It doesn't promise safety, but it promises truth." That's how Evelyn Moretti's story ends, not with loss, but with remembrance, not with silence, but with the sound of waves carrying her heart forward, forever tethered to the man who taught her that even in destruction, something beautiful can begin again. If this story moved you, leave a light in the comments below. Let me know you're still here, so I know our hearts met tonight. Subscribe for more stories that remind you love always finds its way home. And remember, even in the darkest hours, peace is possible. Love never forgets.